This is so odd. Not only do you lose Charles Krauthammer, his influence, we lost him for a year, couldn't wait for him to come back because he had a series of medical challenges. And then we get that letter last week. And it's just so him, the way he said it. I lived the life I intended. I mean, we all hope to get to that point when we get to that point, right?
Yeah, and absolutely, Brian. And that note, the thing about it that was so Charles was how direct it was.
Right.
It was so clear, and he didn't want to leave in any ambiguity about anything. It was just absolutely, perfectly crystal clear, just like every single one of his arguments, every one of the points that he ever made on the special report panel or anywhere else on TV, or in his columns. Oh my goodness, the columns! I think about being a young young boy growing up in a small town in Southern Virginia. We got newspapers. We got the Washington Post. The number of times my father would rip out a column by Charles Krauthammer and send it to and give
Read
it to
this,
me.
Charlie.
Yeah, exactly. Or send it to me in college, and that was what. And it was funny. Years later, when I think it was the special that Bret Baier did about him, that was the thing. Charles's greatest goal was to write columns that parents would rip out of the paper and send to their kids in college, and it was so powerful.
So
yeah,
what was
exactly.
that? What was that like, Charles? When you, what was that like when you're sitting next to him? You're like, my dad used to send your articles to me in college.
Oh, it was incredible, and you know I would almost have to plug my ears so that I wouldn't just repeat whatever it was that he said, because whatever he said was just golden, and you couldn't be improved upon. And Lord knows, you could never disagree with him because of who he was and how he put things.
You would look right over there, and there would be one of those faces from Mount Rushmore sitting right next to me. Charlie, the thing about him and his political point of view, which is unique, though, is when he first went to Washington. He went during the Carter years. He wound up being a speechwriter for Democrat Vice President Walter Mondale, and eventually became one of the most prominent voices in conservative radio and television and writing.
Because he had a heart. And what was it that Winston Churchill said? If you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you're not conservative when you get older, you have no brain. Well, that was Charles Krauthammer. You know, he had a giant heart. He was so generous. He was such a gentleman. But he was also, you know, an undeniable intellect. And the thing that I love the most about him is with his book, the title was Things That Matter. And if you could say anything about him, his greatest wisdom was, whether it's politics or in life, Charles Krauthammer understood the things that mattered. Right. And that was what made it so powerful. And obviously, you know, we're all sad, and we will all miss him. But I think the greatest thing that you could do to celebrate Charles's life today would be to get his book and read it. There's some amazing columns in there. But then go to a baseball game.
Indeed.
Well, you have a wonderful name, Charles Hurt.
I'm lucky.
Name to live up to.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you so much.
All right. Meanwhile, we move ahead. President Trump blasting Democrats for not supporting Republican immigration bills, saying Dems, quote, won't vote for anything.
Mark Levin says Congress shouldn't be compromising our national security, and he's up next. Some quick headlines for you. If you want to eat, you have to work. That's according to the Farm Bill. It just passed the House. If it goes into law, it would require food stamp recipients to look for a job or work at least 20 hours a week. It would also set food and farm policies for the next 5 years. It now moves to the Senate. Meanwhile, another piece of legislation would keep President Trump off the 2020 ballot unless he releases his tax returns. The Rhode Island State Senate passing that bill this week. The president says he cannot release his tax returns because he's under an audit. The bill now heads to the State House. Brian?
It's time for the top moment of the week, arguably. Life, Liberty, and Levin is at 10 o'clock Sunday, but until you get to that show, you have Mark Levin on our show. Mark, I don't know if you heard, but the #1 topic this week has been immigration. So what's your thought on the compromise bill? From what you know, it seems like there's chaos reigning in Capitol Hill.
You know, I don't understand these compromise bills. We have to compromise in order to secure the border. Have you ever heard anything like that in your life? It's a national security issue. It's a public health issue. These people are coming to America because we treat them well. But they're not coming through the legal ports of entry. They're going around them in order to skirt the law. So Our law enforcement says we have to figure out who these adults are. Maybe that little girl that guy's dragging across the border, maybe that's not his little girl. So we have to figure all these things out thousands of times a day with tens of thousands of people, and somehow America sucks. I don't buy into that.
Okay, people say don't separate women and children. I get that. So now the president signs the executive order. We're going to keep them together. Then they say it's not right to keep them together in a holding area. So what is the answer? Just letting them out, giving them a court date and giving them a path to citizenship? Is that fair to everybody else that's doing it the right way?
Look, I want to get very serious about this. When is the last time the Democrat Party or their media mouthpieces proposed anything about securing the border? Kudos to the President of the United States. He comes into office, he sees a problem. Clinton, the Democrats, they have this 1997 consent decree with a liberal judge in the liberal Ninth Circuit, and the judge says you cannot keep these illegal alien kids more than 20 days in detention. And Democrats running around say there is no such law. Well, of course there is. There's a consent decree. So the president signs an executive order which the left immediately says it's going to challenge, and probably successfully. Why? Because the ultimate goal is open borders and to let these people in illegally.
There's a theory out there, and the president presented it in his rally this week in Minnesota. He said, you know, the economy's doing exceedingly well. The North Korea summit's grading very high. So he's on a bit of a roll. And the IG report, the Russian investigation, has hit a pothole for Democrats. And now the exposure of that 514-page Michael Horowitz report under questioning is really exposing maybe a master plot. Everything that he indicated earlier seems to be coming out, at the very least, a lot of controversy. He believes that's why this immigration debate raged. Do you see a connection or a coincidence?
I absolutely do. The timing is not coincidental. It's intentional. Look, if the Democrat Party and the media in this country cared about this issue so much, why did they ignore it for 10 years? Why did they ignore it under Barack Obama? Why did they ignore it under Bill Clinton? Why did they ignore it under George W. Bush? And so when you bring this up, what the media say is, well, wait a minute. They weren't fully enforcing the law like Donald Trump is fully enforcing the law. I don't even understand what that means.
Here we are looking at these hearings, and we're seeing the report, and we're seeing these questions. Why don't we know the names of these DOJ lawyers? Why don't we know the names of these FBI agents? What do you mean they're a witness number one, a client number two? Why is that? Well, Mark Meadows exposed two more names. We're about to get a couple more. Then the IG report reveals that Peter Strzok had a few text messages that talk about a master plot. What's going on here, Mark?
Tell you what's going on. The highest levels of the FBI was corrupted. I said it before. I may have said it here, Brian. Where are the pro-Trump texts? Where are the pro-Trump senior FBI agents? Where are the anti-Hillary texts? Where are the anti-Hillary senior FBI agents? There aren't any. And that should tell you everything you need to know.
Mark Levin, I'll be watching, all right? And hopefully you will not wear a tie, because I like that look in particular.
You can bet on that.
And I will. You just heard Mark Levin's take, but there's even more fallout from the IG report. By the way, you can watch him Sunday at 10. It's not good for the FBI. We're going to find out a lot more. Plus, Bret Baier looks back at the remarkable life of Charles Krauthammer as we remember our colleague this morning as he passed away yesterday.
Do you think you'll ever stop writing?
No, I intend to die at my desk.
Really?
I would like to. I'm not sure I can arrange it.
Today and all day, and for a long time, we're going to remember our friend and beloved Fox News commentator, Charles Krauthammer. He passed away after a long fight with cancer.
The Pulitzer Prize winner and best-selling author, inspiring millions of people with his insight and his wisdom across the political spectrum.
Special report host Bret Baier shares this emotional tribute to his very good friend.
It's my job to call a folly a folly.
Charles Krauthammer, columnist, author, and Fox News commentator, lived his life telling others exactly what he thought.
You're betraying your whole life if you don't say what you think, and you don't say it honestly and bluntly.
It was that quality that brought Charles to Fox News Channel during Brit Hume's tenure as anchor.
This is not a man designed for television. You look at him and say, this is not a potential TV star. In fact, he became a huge star, even I would almost say a mega star on this channel. And it was the sheer force of his intellect and the power of his thinking. And on top of that, there was a gentleness about him personally that if he disagreed with you, you never felt attacked. He just disagreed with you.
It was always unspoken on the panel that he was always the leader because of his delivery, his intellect.
Special Report stage manager Mary Pat Dennard was on set with Charles every night for years.
It was kind of an ongoing joke on the panel that Brett Baer has a signal when people need to wrap up. I give him 30, so Brett puts his arm out. And Charles was on the show forever, and we always laughed that I don't think he paid attention to that once. He had something to say, he was going to say it. No time constraints were going to control him on that.
Born in 1950s New York to Jewish parents who left World War II era Europe, Charles' father raised his son to value the pursuit of knowledge.
His motto for us was, I want you to know everything. I want you to learn everything. You don't have to do everything, but you got to know everything. He thought that was part of life.
The family lived in Montreal and summered at their cottage in Long Beach, New York.
It was a paradisiacal childhood. My brother and I were inseparable. He always insisted I be included, so I got used to being around the big boys and taking the slings and arrows, and that's how you get toughened up.
As a senior at McGill University in Canada, Krauthammer became captivated by political journalism. He applied to medical school to appease his family and was accepted to Harvard. But Krauthammer put off attending and enrolled at Oxford instead. It was there that he met fellow student from Australia, Robin Trethewey, who would later become his wife. Charles reversed course and headed back to the U.S. to attend Harvard.
Why did you choose psychiatry?
I was looking for something halfway between the reality of medicine and the elegance, if you like, of philosophy. So psychiatry was the obvious thing.
It was there that one unexpected moment, a tragic diving accident, changed Charles' life forever.
It just hit at precisely the angle where all the force was transmitted to one spot, and that is the cervical vertebra, which severed the spinal cord.
When did you realize that the accident was life-altering?
The second it happened.
Despite his permanent paralysis, Charles astounded his professors and classmates by graduating on time, near the top of his class. Ultimately, he decided the field wasn't for him, a career reversal he joked about on Fox decades later.
I'm a psychiatrist in remission, doing very well. I haven't had a relapse in 25 years.
In 1978, Krauthammer headed to Washington, D.C. for a government job.
I thought, once I'm in Washington, isn't that where they do politics? One thing will lead to another.
Robert encouraged him to follow his dreams, and he soon landed at the left-leaning New Republic magazine, just as the Reagan administration took office.
So help me God.
Krauthammer found himself agreeing with the new president and questioning his own feelings about the Democratic Party.
I ended up supporting just about every element of the Reagan foreign policy.
Months after Reagan's re-election, Krauthammer penned the phrase, "the Reagan Doctrine," in a provocative Time magazine column, and the name stuck.
He created the Reagan Doctrine. Nobody had heard of it. Charles put together a piece and dubbed it, and I've read it many times, and it just holds up so well. I think Charles discovered then that there really was a lot to Reagan.
But it would take years before Charles fully embraced domestic conservative ideals.
It took me about a decade. I was skeptical of tax cuts. I was skeptical of smaller government at the beginning. And then by the end of the 80s, I had begun to change.
In 1985, his son Daniel was born. And 2 years later, Charles won the biggest honor in journalism, the Pulitzer Prize. But it was the events of September 11, 2001, that brought a more forceful tone to his commentary and a regular spot on the Special Report panel. Over the years, Charles became an audience favorite.
The biggest error that we make is to lose the damn war because we refuse to recognize who the enemy is and what it requires. For God's sake, why do you have to talk about that? The mourning is over, the Shiva is done, and if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic. I think it'll snow in hell before the DOJ is going to go after her. We all were expecting it. It didn't happen. That was the dog that didn't bark.
Despite all of his accomplishments, awards, and high-profile endorsements, Krauthammer was always humble and at times uneasy with the influence his words held.
I think about it, and I find it worrisome. The reason is that when I was totally unknown, I could say anything I damn well pleased.
That included when his opinions reached presidents.
Read Charles Krauthammer's column in the Post today. He's a brilliant man.
Well, when you get praise from President Clinton, and you're from my side of the aisle, that means that my career's done. I mean, I'm toast.
Krauthammer's high standards for political leaders were bipartisan for President Obama.
Well, I think he's done just about everything wrong.
To then candidate Donald Trump.
This is the strongest field of Republican candidates in 35 years. You could pick a dozen of them at random and have the strongest cabinet America's had in our lifetime. And instead, all our time is spent discussing this rodeo clown. I don't think I've ever heard such a stream of disconnected ideas since I quit psychiatry 30 years ago.
As far as Charles Krauthammer, I'm not a fan of his. I think he's a highly overrated pundit. He's wrong on so many things.
Charles Krauthammer, who, by the way, in Canada Casino put his first money on.
I saw that. I couldn't believe it.
Did you see that?
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to make you look good, Charles.
In recent years, as a Republican administration took office, Charles didn't shy away from his trademark, blunt, unabashedly critical analysis when it came to President Trump.
Presidents don't talk like this. They never have. This is what it sounds like when you're living in a banana republic.
Charles had other loves aside from politics. He played chess and was an avid baseball fan.
I grew up playing the game. I love to play the game.
And loved nothing more than seeing his Washington Nationals play and win.
Know the glory. You know, and with the White House on fire, the Congress in chaos, and the world going to hell in a handbasket, we need happy news like this. This is why God created baseball late on the 6th day.
Friends at Fox News Channel remember that quick wit and Charles' love for talking to anyone.
Special Report has a lot of people that come in and watch it, and they were always in awe of Charles and always very, apprehensive about approaching him. And I would always say, please go say something to him. He would love to talk to you, and he was always so friendly to everyone.
In 2013, Krauthammer released a book, Things That Matter, and summed up the survivor's spirit that has guided much of his life, writing, quote, "The catastrophe that awaits everyone from a single false move, wrong turn, fatal encounter. Every life has such a moment. What distinguishes us is whether and how we ever come back."
There's an element of that in everybody's story, their low point. Do you want it enough, and are you lucky enough? That's a part of it, too.
In mid-June, Krauthammer announced that he'd been diagnosed with cancer, and doctors had given him just weeks to live, writing, "I leave this life with no regrets. It was a wonderful life, full and complete, with the great loves and great endeavors that make it worth living. I am sad to leave, but I leave with the knowledge that I lived the life that I intended."
Do you think you'll ever stop writing?
No, I intend to die at my desk.
Really?
I would like to. I'm not sure I can arrange it.
Charles Krauthammer was 68 years old.
What a life. And what a treasure to be able to have those moving pictures of him as a little boy growing up.
I know. What a bright man.
Tonight at 9 o'clock, you'll see an hour special like no other on Charles's life leading up to the release of his book, which really applies here. And you realize how much you miss his commentary on what we're going through on a daily basis. You always think to yourself, what would Charles think? And I think that when he thought in terms of the president, when he thought the president was right, he'd comment. And when he thought he wasn't, he wouldn't be afraid to comment and get blasted in return. He kind of liked it.
Well, we've heard from so many of you asking where he is over the last year. I know there's people on my parents' street that always ask me when I go home, where is Charles? And he was diagnosed with cancer about a year ago and had so many complications after that surgery, after they removed the tumor. And it was in his abdomen. And then he had lots of complications, looked like he was getting better. And then the cancer a few weeks ago returned, and doctors said, you don't have long to live, and that's when he penned the letter.
A sad end, but what a full life. Charles Krauthammer was 68.
Rest in peace, our friend.
Good morning to you. Welcome back. We have some quick headlines now. A convicted cop killer will soon walk free. Robert Hayes is getting parole after serving 44 years behind bars. According to the New York Post, he could be released as early as July 24th. Hayes shot and killed Sidney Thompson, a transit patrolman, in 1973. The officer and father of two was trying to arrest him for jumping a turnstile. This comes just 2 months after another cop killer, Herman Bell, got parole in New York. Both men members of the Black Liberation Army. Troopers save a man trapped in a burning car after it explodes. Look at this. Body cameras rolling as 1,000 rounds of ammo go off inside the vehicle. The Nevada Highway Patrol troopers pulling the driver to safety. He is expected to be okay. That's a look at your headlines. Steve, I'll send it to you.
Thank you very much, Jillian. New fallout from that recently released Inspector General report causing a ripple effect inside the FBI. Embattled anti-Trump FBI agent, that guy right there, Peter Strzok, who texted that he would stop Donald Trump from becoming president, apparently has lost his security clearance. This, as we learned that 3 of the 5 FBI officials targeted for anti-Trump bias were all part of the Mueller probe. What? Here with the reaction, founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. Charlie, not surprising that Peter Strzok would lose his security counsel. I mean, he was escorted out of the building a couple of days ago.
Well, why hasn't he lost his job? I mean, so they say that's a big deal that he lost his security clearance. I mean, he should have been fired instantaneously when this stuff came out. But this just goes to show that there is an unelected, unknown, a group of bureaucrats at a very, very high level of government agencies that have unlimited political power. And what if we wouldn't have unearthed these documents? What if, the heroes in Congress, such as Devin Nunes or Mark Meadows, wouldn't have went through this unbelievable effort to get these documents? This all just would have been labeled a conspiracy theory.
So we know about 5 employees at the FBI had these anti-Trump texts, but how many others are there? They just didn't catch.
Well, right, and how much other behavior is there that any logical conclusion can say there was probably deleted documents and reappropriated assignments that went against this president time and time again, and this should exonerate the president completely when it comes to the Mueller probe. Because remember, this is the very institution that started the entire fake dossier that ended up launching this investigation.
And Charlie, the fact that Rod Rosenstein will not release the stuff that Congress wants to see, just so they can figure out why did this get started in the beginning? Because it does look to many on the political right, and you mentioned a couple of names that have been at the forefront of this. It looks like the FBI has redacted a bunch of stuff because it makes them look bad. They're not going to hand them over the documents because it started on a flimsy premise.
No one should be above the law. And what you're seeing here is you see a level of government bureaucrats and agents that allow their political bias to get directly into their work. And then when they get challenged, they say, how dare you challenge our work or the integrity of the FBI? The thing that I found most disgusting about the IG report was the one sentence, after all these findings, the integrity of the FBI is still intact. Are you kidding me? You received gifts in exchange with reporters. There you have text messages of senior level FBI agents saying, no, don't worry, we'll stop it. And the integrity of the FBI is still intact? I don't think so. And the President of the United States was correct in firing Comey last spring, and this Mueller investigation should be ended completely and totally.
All right, Charlie Kirk, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. All right, straight ahead on this Friday, the First Lady making a surprise trip to the border, but the media focusing on that coat.
It was impossible to think that that is aimed at the people she just saw. It's more, I think, likely maybe the person who she's married to.
Well, Diamond and Silk have some thoughts about that. They join us live coming up late. Good morning to you, ladies. And it's Take Your Dog to Work Day, and Brian's dogs, Rocky and Apollo, are at work.
It was impossible to think that that is aimed at the people she just saw. It's more, I think, likely maybe the person who she's married to.
She's a model. I mean, she sort of knows the power of clothes.
She does. But
the media choosing to zero in on the First Lady's outerwear, bearing the words, "I really don't care, do you?"
Instead of focusing on her visit to Texas facility, that's housing immigrant children, which she spent a great deal of time in.
Join us right now with their take on this. Social media stars and Trump supporters, Diamond and Silk. Ladies, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, the cover of the New York Post today says, "Has the First Lady gone rogue?" And then it says flak jacket. And the first line says, "Is this a message to her husband or the press or an inadvertent wardrobe choice?" Ladies, what do you think?
We believe that this is a message. This is what we call a diss to the media.
That's right.
To all of these Hollywood elites that say the most salacious, vile, and vicious things about the First Family and our First Lady. The one thing that we love is that your actions speak louder than your words.
That's right.
And this First Lady went down to the border to check on these children. She done something I didn't know. I don't even think any of the other First Ladies that tweeted about it did anything like this. She did that, and that's what we should be focused on.
And instead of talking about it, she was being about it.
Yeah. Here's what the president said. He tweeted this out. I really don't care. Do you? That's the quote on the jacket. Written on the back of Melania's jacket refers to the fake news media. Melania has learned how dishonest they are, and she truly no longer cares. So there's your explanation.
Absolutely. And we need to stick with that, and we need to focus on bigger and better things.
Yeah, but ladies, don't you think because she was going on an important mission to go down and see the facility down there, it was a mistake even to put it on because we're winding up talking about, did it mean this or did it mean that, rather than she went to see the kids?
No, it wasn't a mistake.
What she did is she just proved the point, just how dumb the left really is, to be focusing on her jacket and wording instead of focus on her actions, what she really did.
Right.
It apparently came from Zara and was a little like $35, $36, $39, our producers are telling us. All right, let's move on and talk about your movie. I understand you're making a movie. What's it called? And tell us more about it.
Okay, it's called Dummycrats, okay? So we know that the president is draining the swamp, but now it's time for us to expose the swamp. You know that these Democrats have got to be dumb when you're upset with a sitting president for following the laws that the previous president has followed. Followed, okay? So this movie is going to expose the hypocrisy, expose some members of Congress that's working for their own need and not the need of people.
Okay, can't wait for the credits. All right, thanks. Thanks, ladies. All right, meanwhile, straight ahead, Geraldo Rivera and Judge Jeanine are both here live coming up, but separately.
Plus, we have a big band going to take you out on the stage, out on our plaza for our concert series. Thanks to Keurig. Leonard Skinner is going to perform straight ahead.
One of the greats ever.